Imagine waking up tomorrow morning exactly the same way millions of Americans do every single day. The alarm goes off at 6:30 a.m. You reach for your phone before your feet even touch the floor. Emails are already waiting. Notifications stack up like unfinished thoughts. The news scrolls past your eyes before your mind has even fully arrived in the day. Coffee brews in the kitchen while your mind races through a list of responsibilities, deadlines at work, bills that need to be paid, conversations that didn't go well yesterday, expectations you feel you still haven't met. And somewhere beneath all of that movement, there is a quiet but persistent tension, a feeling that life is something you are constantly trying to keep up with, but never quite catching. Now here is the strange question that almost no one stops to ask. What if the exhaustion you feel is not coming from your job, your finances, or even your relationships, but from the invisible effort of trying to control life itself? What if the real source of your stress is something much deeper and much more subtle? The silent resistance inside your mind that keeps insisting life should be different from what it is right now. Because if you look carefully, most people today are not actually living life. They are negotiating with it, arguing with it, trying to rearrange it so it finally feels safe, predictable, and under control. We push harder at work hoping success will finally calm our thoughts. We chase financial stability believing the next raise, the next investment, the next opportunity will bring peace. We analyze relationships, replay conversations, and imagine better outcomes as if the mind could rewrite reality through sheer effort. Yet the strange paradox is that the more we try to control everything, the more chaotic life begins to feel. The harder we grip the steering wheel of existence, the more turbulence appears on the road ahead. And somewhere in the middle of all this effort, a quiet truth waits patiently, almost hidden in plain sight. Perhaps happiness was never meant to be forced into existence. Perhaps it appears when something inside us finally relaxes its grip on the need to control everything. But here is the deeper mystery. If letting life be is so simple, why does it feel so difficult? Why does the human mind resist this idea so strongly? Why do we keep chasing answers outside ourselves when the tension we feel is created inside our own thinking? Tonight, we begin exploring a philosophy that has quietly echoed through centuries of wisdom traditions, yet feels more relevant today than ever before. The philosophy of simply letting life be. And as we unfold this idea, you may begin to notice something surprising about your own thoughts, your own struggles, and the hidden patterns that shape your experience of reality. Hello, and welcome to The Inner Code. If you are someone who has ever felt overwhelmed by the noise of your own thoughts, confused about the direction of your life, or quietly searching for a deeper sense of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances, then you are in the right place. This channel exists to explore the hidden patterns of consciousness, perception, and the inner principles that shape the life we experience. If these ideas resonate with you, consider subscribing to the channel and supporting this journey so we can continue creating more conversations like this in the future. And before we continue, take a moment to reflect on this question. When life feels stressful, what do you believe is the real cause? A. Life becomes stressful because external situations, money, work, relationships, are difficult. B. Life becomes stressful because the mind constantly resists and tries to control what is happening. Comment A or B below and share your perspective. And once you begin to suspect that the pressure in your life may not come only from what is happening around you, a more unsettling realization begins to emerge. You may have been living in a way that feels completely normal, even though it has quietly disconnected you from yourself for years. Maybe this is why so many people can look successful on the outside and still feel strangely hollow on the inside. Maybe this is why someone can have a stable paycheck, a decent apartment, a busy social calendar, and still carry an unspoken heaviness they cannot explain. Because there is a kind of suffering that does not come from tragedy, but from constant inner friction, from the exhausting effort of trying to manage every possibility before it happens, trying to secure the future before it arrives, trying to make life obey the mind's preferred script. You may recognize this pattern in your own life more than you realize. It appears in the person who checks their bank account several times a week, not because they are in immediate danger, but because uncertainty itself feels unbearable. It appears in the employee who cannot enjoy Friday evening because Sunday night is already living in their chest. It appears in the person who replays a text message over and over, wondering whether they sounded too distant, too needy, too honest, or not honest enough. It appears in the man who feels he must always be strong, always productive, always moving, because slowing down would force him to hear what his own mind has been trying to drown out. It appears in the woman who has become so used to carrying everyone's emotional weight that rest now feels like guilt instead of relief. And the strange part is that most of this happens so quietly, so automatically, that we call it responsibility, ambition, maturity, discipline. We rarely call it what it often is: fear dressed up as control. In a culture that rewards busyness, self-optimization, and constant forward motion, it is easy to confuse inner tension with a meaningful life. You can spend years believing you are doing everything right simply because you are doing everything expected. You wake up, perform, respond, improve, manage, cope, achieve, recover just enough to begin again, and somewhere along the way, you stop noticing that your soul has not been included in the conversation. Many people are not only tired because they work too much. They are tired because they are mentally bracing against life from the moment they wake up. Their body is at the office, at the dinner table, in the car, in the grocery store, but their mind is somewhere else entirely, negotiating with tomorrow, revisiting yesterday, comparing the present moment to a version of reality that does not exist. And this creates a hidden loneliness, because you can be surrounded by people and still feel as if no one truly sees what is happening inside you. You smile, answer emails, meet deadlines, make plans, pay rent, show up for others, and still go to bed with the quiet feeling that something essential is missing. Not because your life is broken, but because your inner world has been living in resistance for so long that peace now feels unfamiliar. This is the mirror many people avoid, because it asks a painful question. What if the life you call stressful is not only difficult because of circumstances, but because your mind has been trained to oppose reality at every turn? And if that is true, then the issue is not that you are weak or failing. The issue may be that you have mistaken constant mental effort for living. Once you see that pattern clearly, something begins to soften, and that softening opens the door to a completely different way of being. And it is precisely in that moment, when something inside you begins to soften, that a truth both simple and unsettling finally has room to enter. Maybe the problem is not your life at all. Maybe the deeper problem is that you have never truly allowed life to be what it is before demanding that it become something else. That may sound almost too simple at first, but if you stay with it, it begins to explain more than most people are willing to admit. Because many of us were never taught how to meet life. We were taught how to manage it, improve it, optimize it, outwork it, and protect ourselves from it. From an early age, the message is subtle but constant. Do not trust the present moment as it is. Fix it, upgrade it, get ahead of it, turn it into something more useful, more profitable, more impressive, more secure. And so the mind becomes conditioned to stand in permanent opposition to reality. It does not know how to rest in what is here. It only knows how to measure, judge, and ask what must happen next before it can finally feel okay. This is why even beautiful moments so often slip through our hands. A Sunday morning with no alarms becomes an opportunity to catch up on unfinished tasks. Dinner with someone we love becomes a quiet stage for unspoken expectations. A promotion is followed almost immediately by anxiety about what comes after the promotion. A new relationship is shadowed by fear of how long it will last. Even joy is often interrupted by the mind's instinct to control it, preserve it, or turn it into proof that life is finally going the right way. But life was never meant to be held that tightly. The more tightly we hold it, the less of it we actually experience. The tragedy is not only that we suffer. The tragedy is that we become strangers to the only place life has ever truly existed, which is this moment before the mind turns it into a problem. To let life be does not mean becoming passive, careless, or indifferent. It does not mean accepting injustice, abandoning responsibility, or pretending pain does not matter. It means something far more honest and far more difficult. It means seeing clearly what is here before your fear begins rewriting it. It means allowing a moment to arrive without immediately turning it into a verdict about your worth, your future, or your failure. It means letting disappointment be disappointment without building an identity around it. letting uncertainty be uncertainty without treating it like an emergency, letting change be change without assuming it is punishment. Most people do not suffer only because life is hard. They suffer because every difficult moment is instantly met by a second layer of resistance. This should not be happening. This is ruining everything. I need to fix this now. I cannot feel this. I cannot lose this. I cannot not know. That second layer is where the mind turns pain into torment. And the shocking part is that this layer often feels so normal we mistake it for intelligence. We call it planning, self-protection, ambition, standards, emotional awareness. But often it is simply resistance wearing a respectable face. The mind believes that if it loosens its grip, everything will collapse. Yet for many people, the grip itself is what has been collapsing their inner world for years. There is a quiet freedom that begins the moment you stop asking life to justify itself before you agree to be present with it. In that freedom, you do not become weaker. You become more real. You stop wasting your energy arguing with moments that have already arrived. You stop needing every chapter of your life to match the image you once had in your head. And in that space, something unexpected appears. Not perfect happiness, not instant peace, but a deeper kind of stability, the kind that comes when you are no longer at war with reality. This is the twist most people miss. The life you have been trying so hard to control may not be the enemy. The enemy may be the invisible habit of refusing to let life unfold unless it first obeys your fear. And once you begin to see that resistance is what turns ordinary pain into silent suffering, it becomes impossible not to notice one of the places where this resistance hides most convincingly: our relationship with money. In America, money is rarely treated as a practical tool alone. It becomes something far heavier, almost psychological, almost spiritual in the way it shapes identity, safety, and self-worth. A paycheck is no longer just a paycheck. It becomes a measure of whether you are falling behind or moving ahead. A number in your bank account quietly starts deciding how relaxed you are allowed to feel, how confident you are allowed to seem, how hopeful you are allowed to be about the future. And because of that, many people do not merely earn money. They carry it in their nervous system. They wake up already bracing against it, already anticipating the next bill, the next rent increase, the next car repair, the next surprise charge on a credit card statement, the next moment life asks for more than they think they can give. This is where the trap becomes so powerful. It is not only that people want financial stability. Of course they do. Stability matters. Responsibility matters. Planning matters. But somewhere along the way, the mind turns money from a necessary part of life into a false promise of inner peace. It starts whispering, once I make a little more, then I'll finally relax. Once I get the promotion, then I'll stop worrying. Once I hit 6 figures, pay off the debt, build the emergency fund, max out the 401k, buy the house, then maybe I can breathe. But for so many people, that moment never fully arrives. The numbers change, but the fear adapts. The income rises, but so do the expectations. The apartment becomes a mortgage, the job becomes a title, the raise becomes a new standard, and the mind keeps moving the finish line just a little farther away. What looked like a path to security slowly reveals itself as a treadmill powered by psychological hunger. This is not because wanting money is wrong. It is because the mind has confused money with permission to feel whole. And no amount of money can permanently calm a mind that has made peace conditional. You can see this everywhere once you look closely. A man spends 10 hours a day working, telling himself he is doing it for freedom, while his inner life becomes more cramped with every passing month. A woman builds a career that looks impressive from the outside, yet feels a quiet panic every Sunday afternoon because her success has not given her the peace she thought it would. A young couple finally moves into a better neighborhood, but instead of relief, they feel a new pressure to keep up, to maintain, to prove they belong there. Even the language around money reveals the deeper wound. People say they are trying to get ahead, as if where they are is somehow behind life itself. They say they are trying not to fall apart, not to drown, not to lose ground. Notice how often the financial struggle is experienced not only as a logistical challenge, but as a personal verdict. That is where suffering deepens, because then every setback feels like failure, every delay feels like inadequacy, and every comparison becomes an injury to the self. The mind starts treating financial uncertainty as evidence that you are not safe, not enough, not where you should be by now. But money was never meant to carry that kind of emotional burden. It cannot tell you who you are. It cannot determine whether your life has meaning. It cannot give you the deep exhale that only comes when your inner world is no longer at war with what is unfinished. There is wisdom in earning, saving, and planning well. But there is also wisdom in seeing that your peace cannot be postponed until every number aligns. Because if you make peace wait for perfect financial conditions, you will remain a prisoner of the next threshold forever. And this is the deeper truth hidden beneath the chase. The mind says more money will free you. But often what truly imprisons you is the belief that you cannot be inwardly steady until the outside is completely secure. And if money reveals how deeply the mind attaches peace to external conditions, work reveals how quietly that attachment can consume a person from the inside out. In American life, work is rarely just work. It becomes identity, proof, social standing, and in many cases, a silent contract with the world that says, if I perform well enough, I deserve to feel secure. This is why burnout is often misunderstood. People think burnout happens only when someone works too many hours, answers too many emails, sits in too many meetings, or carries too much responsibility. But exhaustion is not always created by effort alone. Sometimes it is created by the emotional meaning the mind attaches to effort. It is created when work stops being something you do and becomes something you believe you must constantly prove yourself through. Then every task carries hidden weight. Every deadline becomes a judgment. Every performance review feels like a referendum on your value. Every mistake feels larger than the moment itself because it touches something deeper than the job. It touches the fear of not being enough. You can see this in the person who opens a laptop at 7 a.m. and cannot truly leave work even at 9 p.m. because their body may have stepped away from the desk, but their mind is still trapped inside unfinished conversations, possible outcomes, and imagined consequences. You can see it in the employee who says yes to one more project, one more call, one more favor, not because they have the energy, but because slowing down feels dangerous. There is a quiet terror in disappointing others when your nervous system has linked approval with survival. You can see it in the ambitious professional who spent years chasing the next title, the next promotion, the next level of recognition, only to arrive there and feel strangely numb, because the mountain they climbed did not contain the self they were hoping to find at the top. This is the hidden tragedy of burnout. It is not just physical depletion. It is spiritual estrangement. It is the slow erosion of your inner life under the pressure of constant self-management. It happens when you wake up every morning not with a sense of purpose, but with a subtle feeling of bracing, as though the day is something you must survive rather than inhabit. It happens when rest stops feeling restorative because even your rest has become strategic, another tool to help you return to productivity faster. It happens when weekends are no longer spacious, but merely recovery zones between rounds of performance. In that state, a person can look highly functional and still feel internally abandoned. They can meet deadlines, lead teams, hit targets, and still go home with the quiet ache of someone who has not been present in their own life for a very long time. And the mind often justifies all of it by calling it discipline, ambition, responsibility, or excellence. But beneath those noble words, there is sometimes a more painful truth. Many people are not driven only by purpose. They are driven by the fear that if they stop proving themselves, they will disappear in the eyes of the world. This is why simply escaping the job rarely solves the deeper issue. A new company, a new boss, even a higher salary may change the scenery, but if the inner pattern remains the same, the pressure returns wearing different clothes. Because the real prison is not always the workplace. Sometimes it is the belief that your worth must be earned again every morning. To let life be in the realm of work does not mean becoming careless or unmotivated. It means no longer handing your soul over to performance. It means doing your work with sincerity while refusing to build your identity on every success or failure. It means remembering that your job may be what you do, but it is not the full measure of who you are. And that remembering matters, because the person who cannot separate their being from their productivity will eventually treat every pause as guilt, every limitation as shame, and every human need as weakness. That is how burnout deepens. Not simply through labor, but through forgetting that before you were an employee, a manager, a founder, or a professional, you were a living being who was never meant to become a machine in exchange for approval. And when you finally see how the need to prove yourself can hollow out your work, you begin to recognize that the same invisible struggle follows many people into the place where they most hope to feel safe, their relationships. Few things reveal the human fear of control more clearly than love, because relationships touch the deepest parts of our identity. They awaken the child who wanted to be chosen, the teenager who feared rejection, the adult who learned to associate closeness with uncertainty. This is why so many people say they want love, but what they are often reaching for is not love itself. They are reaching for reassurance, predictability, emotional guarantees, some promise that this person will not leave, will not change, will not disappoint them, will not expose the parts of themselves they have worked so hard to hide. And the tragedy is that the more tightly we try to secure love, the more fragile it begins to feel. In the American imagination, relationships are often burdened with impossible expectations. One person is supposed to be your best friend, your emotional home, your attraction, your peace, your support system, your healing, your future, and sometimes even your proof that your life is finally on the right track. That is a tremendous weight to place on another human being. Because no matter how loving someone is, they cannot permanently regulate the fear you have not yet learned to hold within yourself. And so what begins as connection slowly becomes management. A text message goes unanswered for 2 hours, and the mind starts inventing stories. A partner seems quieter than usual, and the silence is immediately translated into distance. A disagreement becomes evidence that something is wrong at the foundation. A changed tone, a delayed response, a forgotten detail, a need for space, and suddenly the relationship is no longer being lived but monitored. This is where love begins to suffocate under the pressure of unconscious control. It is not always loud. Sometimes it appears as over-explaining, overthinking, over-accommodating. Sometimes it appears as emotional withdrawal, pretending not to care, staying one step ahead of disappointment by never becoming fully vulnerable. Sometimes it appears as trying to fix the other person so the relationship can finally feel stable. But beneath all these patterns lies the same quiet refusal. The refusal to let another person be a living, changing, imperfect human being. The refusal to let love remain a space of encounter instead of turning it into a system of emotional risk management. You can see this in the couple who loves each other but lives in constant tension because each person is trying to control how they are perceived. You can see it in the man who cannot simply hear his partner's pain because his mind instantly hears criticism and moves into defense. You can see it in the woman who longs to feel deeply loved but cannot receive love without analyzing whether it will last. You can see it in marriages that do not collapse from a lack of feeling, but from accumulated layers of unspoken fear, managed image, and emotional self-protection. The deepest problem in many relationships is not the absence of love. It is the presence of resistance. Resistance to discomfort, resistance to uncertainty, resistance to the fact that another person cannot exist purely to stabilize your inner world. To let life be in a relationship does not mean tolerating disrespect or abandoning healthy boundaries. It means allowing the other person to be real without forcing every emotional wave into a threat. It means listening without immediately translating everything into rejection. It means allowing moments of tension, silence, difference, and misunderstanding to exist without turning them into proof that love has failed. Because love matures when control relaxes. Intimacy deepens when performance softens. And peace enters a relationship when at least one person stops trying to extract certainty from every moment and begins offering presence instead. That is the hidden shift. Many people believe they are suffering because love is unstable, when in truth they are suffering because the mind cannot stop trying to make love feel permanently safe. But real love was never meant to be a cage built out of guarantees. It is something far more alive than that, and it only becomes visible when we stop gripping it with fear. And when you finally see that the same pattern of grasping distorts money, work, and even love, a deeper principle begins to reveal itself beneath all of them. One so simple that the mind often overlooks it precisely because it changes everything. Life has a natural movement, but suffering intensifies whenever we try to force that movement to obey our fear. For centuries, wisdom traditions in both East and West have pointed toward this same insight in different language. Some called it harmony, some called it surrender, some called it trust, some called it the art of non-resistance. But beneath the different words was one quiet recognition. Reality has its own intelligence, and the more violently the mind pushes against what is already unfolding, the more fragmented the inner world becomes. This does not mean that everything that happens is easy, fair, or pleasant. It means that there is a difference between pain and opposition to pain, between challenge and the identity built around challenge, between a difficult season and the mental war that turns that season into a personal prison. Life moves in cycles most people do not want to accept. There are seasons of expansion and seasons of waiting, seasons of clarity and seasons of uncertainty, seasons when doors open quickly and seasons when everything feels delayed for reasons the mind cannot understand. But the human mind, especially in a culture built around speed, control, and measurable progress, is deeply uncomfortable with organic timing. It wants immediate answers, visible results, certainty on demand. It wants the seed to become a tree by Friday. It wants grief to be over in 2 weeks, healing to follow a schedule, love to arrive without risk, and purpose to show up with a map and a deadline. Yet life rarely unfolds that way. Life has a more mysterious rhythm. It ripens things invisibly. It changes people slowly. It builds depth in silence. It rearranges inner ground long before outer evidence appears. And this is where so many people lose trust, because they mistake what is unseen for what is absent. They assume that if nothing visible is happening, nothing meaningful is happening. But some of the most important changes in a human life begin in places that cannot be photographed, measured, or announced. A heart softening after years of self-protection. A nervous system learning not to panic in uncertainty. A mind beginning, for the first time, to sit in a moment without trying to escape it. A person slowly becoming more real than the image they spent years performing. This is why ancient wisdom has always pointed inward. Not because the outer world does not matter, but because the inner state determines whether you experience life as a battle or a relationship. The same rain can feel like an inconvenience to one person and a blessing to another. The same silence can feel like abandonment to one person and peace to another. The same delay can feel like humiliation to one person and preparation to another. What changes the experience is not only the event, it is the consciousness meeting the event. And that may be one of the most important truths a person can remember. Much of our suffering comes not from life itself, but from the meaning of frightened mind attaches to what life is doing. The hidden principle is not that you must control reality more skillfully. It is that reality becomes lighter when you stop making every moment fight with the story in your head. The river does not suffer because it moves around the stone. It continues. The sky does not panic when the weather changes. It remains. Nature is filled with quiet examples of what the human mind has forgotten. Strength is not always force, and wisdom is not always resistance. Sometimes wisdom is the ability to remain open while life changes form around you. Sometimes power is the refusal to turn uncertainty into despair. Sometimes healing begins the moment you stop asking why this is happening to me and begin asking what in me is being invited to soften, to trust, to mature. If this truth resonates with you, let this be your affirmation today. I do not need to force life to feel peace. I choose to trust the wisdom of this moment. If you feel that sentence in your heart, comment it below and let it become a conscious signal of the shift happening within you. And once that truth is no longer just an idea, but something you can actually feel inside your body, the next step is not to admire the insight, but to live it. Because a philosophy only becomes real when it changes the way you meet an ordinary moment. This is where the shift quietly begins. Not in some dramatic breakthrough, not in a perfect weekend retreat, not in a life with no bills, no deadlines, no tension, but in the smallest moments when you notice that your mind is beginning to tighten against reality, and instead of following that tightening, you choose a different response. Most people imagine inner peace as a distant state they will reach once life becomes less demanding. But peace does not usually arrive after pressure disappears. More often, It begins when you stop feeding the pressure with unconscious resistance. It begins in the middle of a traffic jam, not after the road clears. It begins in the middle of a difficult email, not after your inbox is empty. It begins in the middle of an awkward silence with someone you love, not only after the relationship feels easy again. The shift is not that life suddenly becomes soft. The shift is that you no longer become internally violent every time life refuses to follow your preferred script. And because this sounds beautiful but can still feel abstract, it helps to have something simple and concrete you can return to when the mind starts racing. So here is a simple practice, a quiet protocol you can use in real time, whether you are sitting in your car outside the office, standing in your kitchen at 7:15 a.m., staring at a bank notification, or lying awake at 2 a.m. feeling your thoughts pull you into the future. The first move is to pause the momentum. Not solve, not analyze, not fix, just pause. For a few seconds, stop the internal chase and let yourself notice that you are here. Feel your feet on the floor, your back against the chair, your hands, your jaw, your breath. The purpose is not relaxation at first. The purpose is interruption. You are breaking the spell of automatic mental reaction. The second move is to name what is happening without exaggerating it. Instead of saying everything is falling apart, you quietly tell the truth in a simpler way. I feel pressure right now. I feel fear right now. I do not like this uncertainty right now. That changes everything, because the mind loses some of its power when it is no longer allowed to turn one moment into an entire identity. The third move is to allow the moment to exist before trying to control it. This does not mean you like it. It means you stop arguing with the fact that it is already here. You let the email be unanswered for 1 minute before reacting. You let the disappointment be felt in your chest before turning it into a life story. You let the silence in a conversation be silence before filling it with panic. The fourth move is to choose one grounded action from the present instead of 10 anxious actions from imagination. Send the message you actually need to send. Drink the glass of water. Step outside for 60 seconds. Open the spreadsheet and look at the real number instead of fearing the imagined one. Ask the honest question instead of rehearsing 20 possible outcomes in your head. This is how you retrain the nervous system, not through force, but through repeated evidence that presence is safer than panic. Over time, this simple protocol does something almost invisible yet profound. It teaches your inner world that not every wave requires a war. It teaches your body that uncertainty can be felt without becoming catastrophe. It teaches your mind that reality is often far more workable when it is met directly than when it is resisted in advance. And perhaps most importantly, it restores dignity to the present moment, because the present moment is where your life is happening. But for many people, it has become a doorway they rush through on their way to some imagined future where everything is finally under control. The real shift is that you begin to return here. You begin to trust that this moment, even unfinished, even uncomfortable, can hold you. And that is not passivity. That is maturity. That is inner stability. That is the beginning of a happiness that does not depend on life becoming perfect before you allow yourself to feel alive. And once you begin returning to the present instead of trying to outrun it, something even more intimate begins to reveal itself. Some of the most peaceful moments of your life were never the moments when everything was finally fixed, but the moments when, even briefly, you stopped fighting what was already here. Think about that carefully, because it changes the entire way we have been taught to search for happiness. Most people assume peace belongs to a future version of life, to the day the finances are stable, the work feels meaningful, the relationship is effortless, the body is rested, the mind is quiet, and the path ahead is clear. But if that were true, peace would only belong to the fortunate few who happen to align every external condition at once. And yet that is not how human beings actually experience the deepest forms of relief. Some of the most profound peace people have ever felt came in imperfect places. It came sitting in a parked car after crying, when there was finally nothing left to pretend. It came during a slow walk at dusk after a hard week, when the sky looked ordinary and yet something inside loosened. It came in a hospital room where uncertainty remained, but love became more real than control. It came in the middle of grief, when for one brief moment the mind stopped asking life to explain itself and simply let the heart feel what it needed to feel. It came at the kitchen table after a long day, when the house was quiet, the dishes were still there, tomorrow's responsibilities had not disappeared, and yet there was a fleeting recognition that this small moment was enough. These moments matter because they reveal a truth the controlling mind does not want to admit. Peace is not always the reward for a solved life. Often it is what becomes visible when resistance temporarily steps aside. That is the deeper lesson hidden beneath everything we have explored. Money matters, but peace cannot be reduced to numbers. Work matters, but your soul cannot be measured by output. Relationships matter, but love collapses when it is asked to eliminate all uncertainty. The mind keeps trying to build a life so controlled that discomfort can never enter, but life has never worked that way and never will. Discomfort enters. Change enters. Endings enter. Delays enter. Misunderstanding enters. Fatigue enters. Uncertainty enters. The question is not whether these things will touch your life. The real question is who you become when they do. Do you become smaller, tighter, harder, more frantic, more defended, more identified with fear? Or do you slowly learn the deeper art of remaining present, honest, and inwardly steady, even while life continues to move? That is where the philosophy of simply letting life be becomes more than an idea. It becomes a way of walking through the modern world without losing your center every time reality changes shape. And this is especially important now because so many people are living in a near constant state of internal negotiation. They are trying to feel secure before the future is known, worthy before the result arrives, lovable before someone proves it, calm before the world calms down. But life keeps teaching the same quiet lesson. If you postpone your inner permission to live until everything feels certain, you will spend most of your life waiting at the threshold of your own existence. So what does this wisdom ask of you now, in real life, not as theory but as practice? It asks you to notice where you are arguing with reality today. It asks you to see the place where your mind is saying this moment should be different, this person should be different, I should be further along, I should already know, this discomfort should be gone by now. And then, instead of feeding that argument, it asks you to soften, not to quit, not to become passive, not to abandon wise action, but to release the extra suffering created by mental resistance. If you are carrying money stress, let today's lesson be this: handle what is real, but do not turn your worth into a balance sheet. If you are carrying work pressure, let today's lesson be this: give your effort honestly, but do not hand your identity over to performance. If you are carrying relational pain, let today's lesson be this: love truthfully, but do not demand guarantees that no human being can provide. If you are in a season of uncertainty, let today's lesson be this: you do not need the whole map to take the next grounded step. This is how wisdom becomes embodied. One breath at a time. One interruption of panic at a time. One honest moment of presence at a time. And over time, a person who lives this way begins to change in a manner that is quiet but unmistakable. They stop being so easily controlled by delay. They stop interpreting every detour as failure. They stop needing life to constantly reassure them before they can trust it. They become softer without becoming weak, clearer without becoming rigid, calmer without pretending that pain does not exist. They become someone who can live in reality without being crushed by the fact that reality moves. That may be one of the most beautiful forms of maturity a human being can reach. Not the ability to dominate life, but the ability to meet it fully. Not the power to prevent every storm, but the wisdom to remain inwardly rooted when the weather changes. So as this message settles in, here is a simple question for you. What is one area of your life where you are ready to stop fighting and start trusting a little more? Please share your answer in the comments so others can reflect with you and learn from your perspective. And if this video spoke to something real in you, subscribe to the Inner Code and support the channel so we can keep creating deeper conversations like this together.